Thank you, John. Yes, my name is Hubert Lavallee. I live in Montreal. I'm not a farmer. I don't know much about farming. I'm someone who joined Protec-Terre because I wanted to eat healthy food for me, for my family. And it happened that the first project that Protec-Terre put together was the one I joined for the community baskets. So it was a lot for us to meet with the people at the farm, Cadet Roussel farm, with this project. And me and my wife, we found that it was a very nice project. It went with our vision of agriculture. So I joined Protec-Terre. That was about 20 years ago. And I've been a board member since, and I'm president of the board, chair of the board. I've been for the last about 15 years. So I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation that I will share with you. Will help me go through what we are doing in Quebec. So here it is. I don't know if everyone can see my screen.
It's working.
Good. So Protec-Terre is a nonprofit organization. It was founded in 1990. And we've got charitable status about 2 years ago, which is very good for us to get some funding for the projects, but also we use that status to transfer land from owners to the land trust at a lesser cost because of the charitable status than we could do otherwise. So the mission, the vision of Protec-Terre is to empower communities to take back control of the land, to build local food systems that benefit everyone and are respectful of the ecosystem. So if you were part of the webinar last week, you see that our main purpose is not to help farmers establish on the land, although this is also a side effect of our land trust. But really, we feel that the community has to be involved to get the benefit of those land and also to support the farmers in their business, in their endeavor to feed the population and to do it in a respectful way for the environment. So I'll be talking about the legal aspect of the social trust, which is a very specific type of trust that was introduced in Quebec in 1994, and how we use it in Quebec to build agroecological land trust, and what are the challenges we face and lesson learned over the last 30 years. So I will try to go rapidly about the trust. We talked about that last week, but essentially, any kind of trust is built and created when you use some assets and you give them a purpose, a mission that will benefit some people for a number of years. So every trust, whether it's a private trust, a social trust, or otherwise, has those same elements. When we use it for farmland trust, of course, the assets is mainly the farm. It can be also the buildings that are on the farm and other things. The mission is, we'll talk about that later on, but is primarily to preserve the land and make sure it will be there for the next generations. The beneficiaries are the whole society, And the duration, in case of the social trust, can be perpetual. So we have all those aspects covered in, let's say, a legal system that is very strong and can allow us to do what we're trying to do. So in Quebec and in Canada in general, there are different types of trust. There is the personal trust that is mainly used to give some benefits to someone in our family or close family. We can think of money put in trust for higher education of our children, for instance. There is also the private trust, which is made by a group, a private group. It can be a company or otherwise, and it's there also to protect assets for the benefit of private groups and citizens. But what's really special in Quebec is that in 1994 was introduced in our civil code the social trust. Social trust with the same kind of elements, but that have as beneficiaries the whole population. So actually, it has to benefit everyone who wants to be part of the trust and wants to benefit from its actions. And as far as we know, this is the only place in the old world of this where this kind of trust is used and has been put into the law. And the other interesting thing is that compared to the private and personal trust, the social trust is not there for profitable reasons. It's there to for the population to bring benefits, but not necessarily financial benefits. So what are the characteristics of the social trust? I said it earlier, it can be perpetual. It can have an end date. It can be for 25 years, 50 years, 100 years. But as far as the assets are maintained and the mission can be fulfilled, there is no end date to a social trust. The reason why we choose to go with a trust instead of going with a nonprofit organization to preserve the land, as it is done many times for nature conservation, is that when you define the purpose of a social trust, or of any trust actually, this purpose cannot be modified by either the settler, the trustee, or the beneficiaries. So this purpose is there to be fulfilled by the trustee, but cannot be modified. If we would have used a nonprofit organization to do that, then members at the General Assembly could modify the purpose of the organization. And it can be minor modification, but it could be major modification. They could decide to sell the land and to use it at other purposes than was meant to when it was created. The patrimony of the trust can be deemed inalienable and non-seizable. We put those clauses in every act of creation of trust we do, to make sure that the trustees will make sure that the land is preserved for perpetuity. The other thing that's very interesting is once you put the land in one of those social trusts, the land itself has no owners. It is there only for the purpose that it was meant to accomplish. So I'll say a little bit later how it compares to a common, but this is what is the main variable that links it to the common is that it's not a private land anymore. It's not a public land. It's a land that is there for the purpose that the community will decide. And then as far as governance is concerned, the trustee, so the people that administer this trust, must report to the beneficiaries at least once a year. And the beneficiaries being the whole population, there has to be a way to communicate how the trust is going, what it is doing, and how the trustees manage it so that it will be kept running and make the benefits it was used to do. So the link between the social trust and the common is that it is not a private property, it's not a public property, it's a property that is there for a usage that will benefit the community. It has a long-term vision that requires that the trustee put forward actions to maintain the land in good farming conditions. So we think this is very important for the perpetuity, but also for the benefit for the community. It is a balance between conservation and social usage of the resource. We want farming to be good for the environment, good for the soil, but we also want it to be used to bring benefit to the population, to the community, and not just for food purposes, but also as a link between the community and the farmers, and as an economic activity that benefits the whole population. We think it's a value added to the community, and we think if it's well done, the governments can be very democratic as we want in a common. So why did we choose to name it agroecological social trust in Quebec? Is because we think that agroecology is the way to go if we want to maintain the soil, the land, and the environment for the long term. I was recently at Terra Madre in Torino, in Italy, at this event that was put together by Slow Food International. And the theme of Terra Madre this year was agroecology. And I was happy to learn that it was demonstrated by research that we can grow food in an agroecological manner that will be as productive as the chemical way we're doing with the agro industry right now, and with a lot better benefits for the environment and the community. So we think agroecology is the way to go for farming, and not just the production side of agroecology, but also the economic and societal values that are brought with it in order to adapt each production to the community and the needs of the community. So when we help communities create social trust in Quebec, because we think it's very important that the social trusts are linked to the community and that the community is involved in the creation of each social trust. We decide with this community what will be the purpose of the trust. Of course, there is always a purpose that is linked to food production for the community, but there can be many other purposes that are included in the trust document. Here I have listed the one we see the most often, community education, research, food security for people that cannot afford to pay for organic food or to have a healthy diet in their plate. Biodiversity, inclusion of marginalized people on the farm or within the community that is with the farm. Reconciliation with First Nation. We actually had the creation of our first social trust that had in its purpose education of First Nation um, uh, activities on the land and the way they see the land. So as part of the reconciliation process, we think that was a very good initiative, and so on. So this means also that we can define a purpose that will fit really the needs of the population, the community. And all the other thing that is interesting is that when we put together one of those social trusts, there are different options as to how it will be operated. We favor that the land be held in the trust, but whatever is on that land be owned by the farmer, which means the buildings, the infrastructures, the equipment, and so on, so that the farmer has some assets to borrow money, and also is really an owner of the superficies, so that he can make plans for his business, and at a point also transfer his business uh, to his family or to other people that would be interested to continue on the trust. So of course, when we have one of those superficies over the land, there are documents that make sure that the farmers will respect the purpose of the trust, and will farm to benefit the whole community. But there are other ways. I mean, the trust itself could be the operator. We've seen that on some of our trusts, and then it can farm, or it can lease some parts of the land to farmers. Short-term lease are not appropriate, so long-term lease or amphitheoretic lease is what we've seen so far. And the last option is to get an easement to put the trust together. There is only one case in Quebec where this was used, and it was in order to add how do you say a part of an actual farm, to add a protection for wetland and rivers that border that land. So part of the land was granted an easement where we can grow trees and plants that will protect the environment and bring some carbon credit that will be transferred to the owner in order to help him in his operation. The governance of the trust is administered by a trustee, which can be composed of at least one person that is independent of the owner of the land, the original owner. but we usually favor trustees that have from 5 to 9 administrators, and we like it to be a blend of different shareholders of the community. Of course, the farmers is always part of the trustee because he has a word to say on how to maintain the land and how to have the product benefit the community. But every people in that community, every people that has a concern about how the trust is made and the purpose of the trust can be part of the trustees to make sure that we get the support of the community and we get the knowledge from the community to maintain that trust. What are the challenges we face? One of our big challenges in the last 30 years has been to educate the population on what is a farmland trust, how it works, and how it can fit in the farm network, let's say, and how it can help communities and farmers get more benefit from their activities. This is still a challenge. We've made a pretty good job of educating the agriculture network, but we still need to do a lot of education for the general public so that they can adopt this type of model. We've also, even though I told you that the social trust was included in the Quebec civil law 30 years ago, there are still a number of laws and regulations that have not been modified to accommodate the social trust. And the main reason is that it was not used very much at all in Quebec. So Protec-Terre was one of the first organizations that used a social trust for benefits to the community. And now more and more it is used also to facilitate affordable housing. It is used to for patrimony conservation for buildings, let's say. It is also used for environmental protection of wetlands and forests and whatnot. So the more it is used, the more we have to make sure that every law and regulation are adapted to this new type of law of trust, and that if and that there are funds available to be able to create it. So this is the last challenge is funding. Everywhere in Canada, and not just in Canada, everywhere around the world, the cost of land acquisition has increased tremendously. So it's a problem for young farmers, but it's also a problem for anyone who wants to produce healthy, good food for the community and make a decent revenue with it. So we are working to try to develop a specific fund for the acquisition of land here in Quebec. Hopefully the local and provincial government will be part of that, but we'll see how we can manage that. It's really a lot of money to put, but we think that when you build for perpetuity, it's worth it. So lesson learned. The first few social land trusts we created were it was the owners of the land that was the main driver, because those were farmers that had built organic farming on their land, and they didn't want, when they transfer it to someone else, that it returned to chemical agro-industrial farming. So, and they were very happy to find a way to make sure that the use of the land would stay organic. What we found out is that this is a good way to do it, but in order to maintain the trust and to raise the money to operate the trust and all that, we need to make sure that the community is involved. We need to make sure that there is benefit to the community, and really specific benefit, and not just food, as I said earlier, but other benefits. And so that means that in the last few years, every time we've started a project with a community or with individuals that were interested, we made sure that the first thing was to alert the community of what was going on and involve shareholders in that community. Which means also that we have to be patient. It takes time to gather the right people to create the trust. It takes time to raise the money that is needed. And also we have to think about it really specifically for that community. So as I said before, there are many purposes that can be put into the purpose of the trust. So what are the needs of the community, and how can we reflect that into the trust purposes? We have, I would say that about half of the trusts that have been created in Quebec with our help have benefited for a land donation. So it, of course, speed up the process, but more and more, even if owners of the land are very willing to help create a trust, most of the owners have debt. So we need to raise money if it just to cover the debt of the owners in order to be able to acquire the land and create the trust. So financial to raise money for the trust is one of the big action we have to do, and it takes time. We also have to learn that the trust is not a solution for all the problems associated with the current agriculture system. Some of the farmers that are on the land trust didn't have to buy the land at an exorbitant price are still finding it difficult to get enough revenue to live by their business. So there are a number of problems associated with the type of agriculture, the structure of distribution of food in our society, the cost of the product and all that. And this is much more than just having access to the land, is also to have a better food system all in all. So that there are other discussion to have on other aspects of that. In that sense, we also think that a national network for the support, training, sharing best practices is a must for any people that want to get involved in making farmland trust a reality. There are now 10 operating farmland trusts in Quebec that we help put together. And I would say every few weeks we get a call from one of them for some administrative purpose or for other reason. And our best answer is to contact the whole community and find how others have dealt with that kind of problem. So the network is there for that, to make sure that there is research that are being made to answer the issues that will eventually come, and make sure that these solutions are shared with all the other trusts that have been created. The last lesson learned I wanted to say is that there is hope. This is an innovative model, not new. There has been farmland trust going on for more than 100 years in here in North America, but it's coming back. There is more and more interest because of the problem we see to get access to the land, but also because the communities ask for it. So we are part of a global movement. We are part of the solution for the climate crisis, the food crisis where there is around the world. So we think we can do better, and that this is one part of the solution. So to let you know a little bit what we have done in Quebec, you see a map where we've put together all those red dots with the star are the actual operating farmland trusts we helped created. The green spots are projects that we are accompanying right now, and the yellow spots and I don't know, brown spots are other trusts that have been made by others. One of these other organization is actually the Quebec Farm Union, the UPA, who has put together a social utility trust that covers the entire province, where they buy land and give access to that land to young farmers. So we're not alone, and we hope there will be more organizations that use that model in the future. So that's it for my presentation. I didn't want it to be too long, so in order to be able to answer some questions from you people. I don't know if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask question, or if John or other member of the network have question about my presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Oh, yes, perfect. We already have a question. So yeah, feel free to raise your hand or write the question in the chat either way, or just unmute and let us know. But I see Jamie has a question. Go ahead, Jamie.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Hubert, so much for the presentation. I just want to say how impressive I think the work you're doing is, and I'm just getting increasingly excited to learn about it. My question, I guess a comment and a question, having understood a bit more about what Protec-Terre is doing from your presentation, and that you are using a social trust. It's interesting to me that mostly what we call CLTs in the Anglo context are not trusts in that same way. That is to say, they don't have a settler, there's not a trustee or a beneficiary, so-called. They're largely nonprofit organizations that are acting in a kind of trust-like way, but they're not what we would call a legal trust. And I think part of the reason is because we don't have something necessarily equivalent to a social trust as you described it. So I guess my question to you is, how important do you think that trust structure is for the work you're doing? And in particular, it seems to me that the binding of the land to the purposes, and as you described it, sort of removes in some ways the idea of the owner altogether. I guess I wonder how important you think that is to the model as compared to one in which the title, for example, is held by a nonprofit, that is bound by its bylaws and its incorporating documents, but possibly not in the same kind of firmly grounded way as a settler who is establishing a trust.
And that's a good question. And I must say that our model was inspired by the community land trust model in the United States. The founder of Protec-Terre came back to Canada after a year on a farm in Vermont, I think, that was on a community land trust. So the idea is actually the same. We benefit from that form of trust in Quebec to be able to put it together. But I think you mentioned it. The thing is we want to make sure that the organization will not be taken over by people that will change its purpose over the long time. So there has to be ways to make sure that this purpose is maintained. And this is the main reason why we went with the social trust. A nonprofit organization can do similar things. I would say even a cooperative could do the same thing if in its founding documents they put provision to ways not to change the purpose of the original founder of the organization.
Thank you. Laura Howard, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Hello, Hubert. I was wondering, ça va bien? I was wondering, I think we'll be talking more about it, but I think you said that Protec-Terre is a charitable organization, and you said, so I'm guessing most of the money to date to purchase the land has come through charitable donations. Is that correct? Or has there been other funding sources, including like other, is it individual charitable contributions as well of members from the community, or also philanthropic partners and entities that are contributing to those purchasing? That's one. And then two, I was actually just curious because you mentioned that you use the charitable status itself to also be able to transfer the land from the individual to the trust. And I'm just curious a bit about how that works exactly.
Well, we're still working on that, but the thing is that as a charitable organization, we are not supposed to transfer money or assets to a non-charitable organization. But we can use those assets and money we get to fulfill our mission. And since our mission is to put together agroecological farmland trust, we make a partnership with the organization that is creating the trust. And in this partnership, we can transfer some of our assets to theirs because they have the same mission as us. So this is a provision of the Canadian revenue agencies where you can use your assets to fulfill your mission, and it can be done by partner organization, even though they are not charitable organization themselves. Does that explain? So we haven't tested it with the CRA, but we've talked about it with other charitable organizations, and we think that this is the way to do.
Okay, and maybe just is to date most of the charitable donations, are they individual from the community members that want to invest in the trust, or is it supported by larger philanthropic bodies that contribute as well to the purchasing of the land?
Well, our status, charitable status, is fairly new, so we're still developing those partnerships. But up until now, it's mostly individuals that have contributed to the trust. Hopefully, this will evolve with much larger donations from foundation or otherwise.
Okay, I think Sonia, I think you were next with your hand raised.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic presentation. I'm still new to the country, and I'm so sad to have missed the earlier webinar that you had. I have two questions. One is, so I'm really an advocate of regenerative agriculture, so that's one of the main reasons why I'm here. When you talked about, when you give an idea of the map and the numbers, do you have a sense of the number of acres under the social trust, which are ag related, which are sort of agriculture related?
Yes, we did a calculation about a year ago. I don't remember exactly the exact number, but it's still very few. It was about 500 hectares that were protected all over. There are now some projects with more land, and if you compare that to the 2 million hectares that are available for farming in Quebec, it's still very few, but hopefully it will grow over the next few years with more people knowing about it.
The second question I had was, can you give us an idea of what are some of the dollar percentages required to create and operate the trust? If you have that off the top of your, because thinking about if it's per acre, what is the cost of running that trust? Set from the setting up to the operation.
It really varies from trust to trust depending on how they decide to operate it. Let's say the most simple way to operate the trust would be to have a superficies on the trust. So there is a farm that operates the whole land, one superficies, and this farm in the contract between the farm and the trust, they pay for the land taxes. So the trust itself doesn't have very much obligations, financial obligation. I mean, we need some insurance and we need to have some money to cover some expenses, but it's very few. So in a case where there is only one farmer and that there is no need to negotiate leases or to acquire equipment or things like that, it doesn't need much money to operate the trust. Then if you have a bigger land where several farmers will be able to use the land, then you might need the trustee or an organization that will help the trustee, can be a nonprofit organization, lease the land and coordinate the usage of the lands, and even other things like the distribution of food or facilities that will be shared by the different farmers and things like that. So that at this point, there is more cost. There is probably at least one employee that will have to be paid to do this as part-time job or full-time. So you increase how much you need to operate the land. But in that case, also, you will have some money coming from the leases or otherwise by the user of the land. And hopefully, if the community is involved in any way, there could be also money coming from people in the community or from organization, let's say for food security organization or from municipal institution and whatnot. So in all those cases, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but between let's say $2,000 to $5,000 to maybe $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 to operate the trust annually.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
I see Annette, you may go with your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Hubert. That was really, really interesting to hear of the work that you're doing in Quebec. We have so much to learn from all of the experiences across the country, but I think Quebec's got some really unique cases. And so I want to better understand what happens with the assets, because in your presentation, I heard two things. One thing that there are no owners. But then when you started talking about the assets, you referred to owners of the assets. So I'm just trying to figure out how that works, and also who pays for in the case of land that is donated where there are already buildings or there is already some equipment available, okay, that's one case. But what about places where there is nothing, and you have a new farmer coming in and they have to build a house, so who takes care of that, and what happens when the farmer leaves or quits farming?
Yes. Those are very good questions. And as far as ownership of the land and other assets, what's very interesting is that even though the trust is not considered how do you say as a company or a business, it has no real legal aspects. Well, the government treats it as an owner, even if it's not really an owner of the land. So for tax purposes or other things, the trust is as if it was the owner. Now, as I said, the social trust is really something very special, because the assets that are in the trust are not owned by the trust, and they are not owned by anybody. They are assets that are there just to fulfill the purpose of the trust. So it's and they're starting to do some legal and other social researches on how to interpret that and how to use that in many ways for regulation purposes and all that. Because in a way, if there is no owners, who should pay the taxes? And if there is no owners, how can you well, there's a way to administer it, because the trustee in the Quebec civil law is considered an administrator of goods or assets that they don't own. So there is a full number of articles in this civil law that says what are the rights and the responsibilities of the trustee. So that's really no problem. What we suggest also when I talk about superficies is that, and this is also maybe a new way to use it, is that if we put the land in the trust and whatever is over that is transferred to the owner as part of a real property for the owner. So we're talking about the farm buildings and all the infrastructure on that land and all that, then there is a property over the trust, but the trust itself has only to manage the land and make sure that the land will be used by the farmers as it should be used for the benefit of the community. So so this is what we favor. We've also looked at other alternative. It could be amphitheatric leases that are very long and are near property version of the assets on the land and all that. So so what we've found out in the last few years is that the question about ownership of those assets and they are uh, how they are seen by different laws, by different government, varies enormously. And even the interpretation that we ask government agents about what to do with different things is not always the same. So there are a number of gray areas in the regulation that we have to clarify. So we're working on that. And we're not the only one. That's a good thing. There has been a lot of work done in the last 5 years by different organizations here in Quebec. One of which is the TS, which is a research organization that has done a lot to demystify the social trust and to put together some tools for its usage. If anyone is interested, I could give links to that organization. It's TIESS, so they work in with social economy sector of Quebec. So there's a number of people that are trying to make something clear and add to the regulation so that the trust can fulfill its mission. For instance, there are a number of charitable and social organizations that benefit from tax break from municipalities, but the social trust is not there, even though it's there to benefit the community. So things like that we'd like to add to the regulation so that it can facilitate the installation of trust and also facilitate the financial aspect. I don't know if this answered your question, Annette.
Oui, merci.
Awesome. Thank you, Annette. There's one question in the chat from Megan. I'll read it. It's actually 2 questions. So I'll read it now. Does the trust serve as additional protection against expropriation for public infrastructure development, roads, telecommunication, hydro, housing, etc.? And 2, it seems that there's a tension between the mission of land trust to keep land from development and the pressure of municipalities to provide housing, for example. Could this dynamic influence the amount of public funding made available for farmland trusts?
Okay, the first question about expropriation. The trust is not cannot avoid those type of things as regulation, because there are some would you say priorities in the way municipalities and even the let's say the mine laws here in Quebec and probably in other parts of Canada can get over those type of protection to develop the land. This said, if a municipality or other interests would like to expropriate one of those social land trusts that benefit the community and are perpetual, what would be the compensation they could give for a land that is there to serve the community forever? Is there an amount of money that can cover those kind of mission, you know? So we haven't been challenged yet on one of those trusts, but we think that there would be a case to debate how much compensation would be available for that, and also why would let's say, a municipality expropriate an asset or an organization that is there to benefit the whole community. I mean, it would be counterproductive in a way to go against a benefit to the community. So hopefully there won't be any of those challenges, but this is something also that we are thinking about and try to find ways to make sure that this won't happen. So that was for the first question. Can you remember me? What was the second question?
Yep, I'll just read it again. It seems that there's a tension between the mission of land trust to keep land from development and the pressure of municipalities to provide housing, as an example. Could this dynamic influence the amount of public funding made available for farmland trusts?
Of course, there are different vision of development in municipalities and all that. Here in Quebec, there seems to be some sort of consensus that before adding development on new land, there should be an effort made by municipalities to try to build within the actual limits of the municipality before going on other land. We also have quite a strong land protection act for farmland in Quebec. That is actually being revised right now by the government. There has been a consultation made over the last year to see how to improve the law that is protecting the land, because there has been many loopholes that have permitted municipalities and other to build or to develop other kind of industries on farmland. So there seems to be a consensus that we don't have enough farmland to let it go for development if it can be done elsewhere. This said, there is always this, it seems that governments and municipalities and even private people are not able to take into consideration all the different aspects of development when they try to do a project, not just the economic short-term impact, but also the environmental impact and also the social impact and all that. We've seen our own government, provincial government, use decree to go over its own law of protecting the land and put some industrial complex on farmland. So it's a challenge. It's a fight that citizens and organizations have to conduct to make sure that we protect the farmland, and we have more strong regulation to avoid municipality to expand if they can do otherwise by using their own the land that is already there and transforming the cities to be more compact with more housing in its actual limits.
Thank you. There are a few more questions in the chat from Sonia. I'm gonna read them one at a time because they might be a bit longer to answer. First one, could you please elaborate a bit more on easement in regenerative agriculture terms?
Well, an easement is it's a way to give some of the rights of the property to another party. So in the case of land easement, the owner is keep the property of the land, but it gives the rights of its usage to another organization. So we could actually create a land trust on a property that is not owned by the trust, but with an easement that is given to the trust, especially if this easement is a perpetual easement. This has been done for a long time for nature conservation purposes, where people that or municipalities that own forests or wetlands give easement to a nature conservation organization so that they can protect this land. So this is the same with what we're doing. The main problem with using an easement or instead of acquiring the rights, the full rights on the land, is that this doesn't stop speculation on the land. This doesn't stop ownership that could be at the end of the easement, if it's not perpetual, transferred to someone who will use the land in another way. But in some instances, I would say, for example, that municipalities sometimes have bylaws that prevent them to give the land or even to sell the land to an organization, but they could do an easement to provide that land for the community to create a land trust. So that would be an instance where an easement could be a good use to create a land trust. And as I said, what someone has done in Quebec is that they go see an owner, farm owners, and they see that there are some environmental problem with rivers or wetlands that border the farmland, and they asked the farm owner if they would provide an easement for, let's say, a band of 15 meters from those land in exchange for revenues that would come from with the carbon credit that will be created on that band, so that the farmers or the owner of the land doesn't lose the benefit of the land, but there is an environmental benefit and a social benefit that is made. So this has been done here in Quebec by a social trust that do that at different farmland with the use of easement.
Okay, and this second question was, what are other sources of funding for social trust, especially in agriculture, that are different from government or prior landowners' donation?
Other sources of
Funding.
Funding. Well, we're developing a whole set of different ways to fund the acquisition of land. It can be as simple as crowdfunding for some part of it. We also use, or it tends to be more in use, community bonds that could be used to raise part of the money, and at least for short and middle term, because the bonds will have to be repaid at some point. But to acquire the land, it can be a good way to raise quite a lot of money rapidly. It can be some money that comes from foundations or from people in the community that are ready to have patient capital invested for a number of years in those trusts. And what we would like to we're working on right now is to have some sort of fiscal fund where the whole community I mean, the whole, every citizens could invest in with, of course, a low return on investment, but for the purpose of protecting farmland in Quebec, a little bit like the actual, there are already some fiscal fund for workers fund or for other purposes in Quebec. So we are asking the government, but other parties also, to see the feasibility of having one of those fiscal funds that could be used to gather money to buy land, and then to in a way to that we could repay those funds on the long term basis. So we're working on a kind of a melting pot, a different solution that will fit different projects. Some don't need as much money if the land is donated, some need more money. So there is not one solution for financing those projects. It's often a package of solutions, and we don't decide, it's the community that decide, but we try to have the tools so that they can choose the right financial solutions.
And then the last question is, maybe could be opened up to others if they have any answers. Are there similar examples or innovations in other provinces?
What I can say, I mean, we know that there are some other farmland trusts in Canada and in the States, but there are very interesting examples in Europe. If people are interested to see what is doing done by Terre de Liens in France, for instance, where they have over the last 10, 15 years acquired, I would say, about 200 farmlands in different parts of the province, and given access to young farmers in a fashion where the land is farmed with agroecological manners and all that. This is a good example. And as I just mentioned, in France, they used a fiscal provision to raise money to acquire the land, and they've been able in the last 10, 15 years to acquire good part of land all over France.
Yeah, I would say there's also the agricultural land reserve system in BC that I'm not too aware of, but I know that's one aspect. And then I know there's an eco-village on Vancouver Island that did get some zoning amendments and got like eco-village zoning that allowed for some more untraditional kind of ways of having different infrastructure built that that eco-village was hoping would be used as a precedent to kind of move forward towards kind of creating more housing in rural spaces. Do see if no one else has any more. Obviously, you can put in the chat any examples, but I see that Cheyenne wrote a question in the chat. How does your organization fund the foundational infrastructure purchases needed to offer the land to new farmers? So, you know, drilling a well or putting up a barn and other infrastructure that isn't a one-time use. Are there examples of that?
I'm sorry, I didn't get what?
Like how does the organization, if it does at all, fund foundational infrastructure? So if you got land donated, but a farmer needs to dig a well, is that the farmer? Is there kind of a mutual agreement? Is there anything done there?
It's all part of the, I would say, the business model of each trust we created. How much money do we need to buy the land? If there are assets on that land, buildings on that land, how do we work with that? Are we going to do a split between all the buildings, the superficies, and the land, so that the superficies can be acquired by the farmers and not by the trust, so that they will have full ownership of those buildings? Is there a way this is one thing I didn't mention before. Is there a way when an owner doesn't need the full amount of money to pay for his assets, to have a contract over many years? We've seen that some of the owners are retired people. They don't have children that want to take back the land. They don't need to give the assets to their children. So is there a way to have some sort of contract that we will provide for those people until they die, and then the land will be transferred to the trust? So this is different ways to look at how to finance, but also how to do it not on a short term, but on a long term basis, with the help of the owners and the community, and of course of the farmers that will use the land.
Okay, I think that's all the questions in the chat, and I don't know if anyone else has any more questions. Of course, feel free you can email. People can put their email if they want for further communication. If anyone thinks of any further questions, this is, yeah, obviously an ongoing discussion. Thank you so much, Hubert. That's the Q&As are so good. There's so much more just picked out there with the great questions. It was amazing. Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for their participation as well. I just want to make one last plug for next week's, which is going to be the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, Regenerative and Reparative Agriculture. Again, same time. You have all the links, and you will, if not, be sent the links. And Nat is actually just put it into the chat as well. So that'll be a great one as well. And I just say as well, these kind of webinars started with just more informal discussions about community land trust and rural spaces and farming and how they can help with farmland succession. And we are going to continue those discussions. They're way more informal. We're just kind of some farmers, some people are just interested in the topic, and that's kind of, we might continue that either maybe one more meeting in a month or maybe earlier in the new year. But those would be something that if you wanted to just kind of have chats about it, brainstorming ideas, maybe an example you found online, more informal areas, and that'll be shared as well. And then you'll get today's recording as well, and last week's if you'd like it, or next week's as well.
You can also share my presentation, I don't mind. And I would say thank you very much, everyone. This is not the end of it. This is just the beginning. So feel free to contact us, and we want to be part of that for the whole country.
So again, thank you very much, everyone. And thanks for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Thanks again.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Hubert.